All right. What a blessing that is, isn't it? This morning, Josh Vance is going to come and bring our message this morning. The reason for this is because we have moved to the church to extend to Josh a licensure of gospel ministry. And what that means is that he is coming to preach in view of us as a church at our next business meeting, which will be September the 13th, of extending to him a license to the gospel ministry from First Baptist Church. And what that means is a church that we recognize that God is moving in his life and that he is surrendering to God's calling, and we want to support that in his pursuit of God's calling in his life for him. Josh comes to us. Josh tells us a little bit of his story in his sermon. I was privileged to baptize Josh about 8-9 weeks ago here in our church. Previous to that, he had been pastoring here at the Church of Christ in town. And so with that, Josh, would you please come and open the word for us this morning?
Good morning. It's always a privilege to be able to come and speak and share God's word, and it's been a real blessing more and more lately to do so. We have this is my second sermon today, actually, so I got the privilege of sharing with the Baptist home. So you guys don't get the main course; you guys just get the leftovers and the scraps. All right, so I'll do my best, but bear with me. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I thought about preaching, and actually probably a little bit longer than that, because I'm realizing I'm getting older. Every year goes by, you get older. I don't like how that works. But if you would have asked me if I was going to be a preacher, I would have probably laughed at you. As a matter of fact, when it came about for me to become a preacher, to answer the call, it happened in one of those weird ways. I was running my own restaurant. I was doing things that I wanted to do, and my pastor was getting ready to retire. And so he came up to me and he put his arms around my shoulders and he said, would you like to learn how to prepare a sermon? Would you like to come be a part of a class that's got about 12 guys? And the idea is that you're going to learn how to prepare sermons, and then you're going to rotate with the other 12 guys and preach maybe once every 12 weeks. That way we can pay down the building, and we can eventually, after the building's paid down, we can eventually hire another pastor. I figured, well, I do what everybody does when the pastor comes up with their arms around you. You say yes while having your fingers crossed and shaking your head. My full intention was to show up that Tuesday night and say, no, I tried it, it's not for me, thank you, but no thank you. But God's got a strange sense of humor, I think, because my father-in-law decided to show up that night. Now, he is one of those who's terrified about preaching. Not just preaching, but speaking in public. He's one of those that's so terrified he'd rather die than get up in front of people. And so he showed up that night, and he sat down next to me, and he said that since I was going to do this, that he was going to support me, and he was going to go through it with me. And I'm thinking, man, I'm stuck. I can't bail. There's no way I can bail. There's no way I can say, this isn't for me. Because here he is supporting me. Little did I know that that this was God's intention all along. My first sermon I preached for 15 minutes, and I preached in front of about 12 to 15 pastors. And if you think anything's terrifying, preaching in front of your colleagues like that, that's terrifying. But I loved it. It came to be such a passion for me to be able to share and preach God's word. Those 12 people wound up dwindling down to about 8, and before long it was 2. I couldn't believe it. Pretty soon I was preaching every Sunday to every other Sunday, and I had a Harding University get a hold of me and asked me if they would give me a full ride scholarship if I considered going back to school to be a minister. I didn't know what to do. I didn't think this was where I was supposed to be. I mean, I owned my own restaurant at that time. Everything was going great. But throughout my life, I started thinking about this. Throughout my life, everything that I had wanted to do, God had, as if it was checking it off of a checklist, God was making a mark and saying, okay, is it my turn? When I was 18, I wanted to run my own construction crew. And so I worked hard and I worked my way up and I was running my own construction crew. When I left that, it was as if God was saying, okay, is it my turn? But sadly, I said, no, I don't want to just do that. I want to work as a district manager for the Quad City Times, a big newspaper. And so as the district manager, and I worked my way up, and I achieved that as a check mark. And he said, okay, is it my turn? No, I want to be a general manager. I want to be a district manager for multiple restaurants. I want to, and everything was, I want. And every time I left those jobs, every time I got done, it was as if he was checking that off and said, okay, is it my turn? When I owned my own restaurant, I was working quite a bit, but I was seeing unbelievable growth. I was a deacon within the church. I was preaching every other Sunday to every Sunday. And when I bought into the restaurant, the first thing I did was I got down on my knees and I said, God, this restaurant is for you. Whatever it is that you want or you will make of it, this restaurant is for you. And we had unbelievable growth. We turned the restaurant around. We had 40% growth in our revenue. It was amazing. My brother says to this day, it's as if it all went away the day I said, I'm thinking about stepping down as a deacon and giving up preaching so I can work to expand the business. All of a sudden, those massive growths that we were seeing went away, and we were just breaking even. My brother says it was to that day. Everything in my life seemed like God was doing a check mark. Okay, is it my turn? Is it my turn? I've got a plan for you. Is it my turn? Because when I want you to serve, I don't want anything to get in the way from you serving. I want it all. And that's something that's interesting about answering the call. When God calls us, do we listen? Do we hear the call? Better yet, do we really understand who is calling us? And I think that's what really impacted my life. That's what I had to really search for to truly understand what it is God meant by answering the call. I gave up the restaurant and I wound up accepting the full ride scholarship, and I went down to Harding University, got my bachelor's in ministry, and left from there to come up here to Chillicothe. I was preaching at Chillicothe Church of Christ up until May of 2016. And from there, we didn't know where we were going. Because for some reason, my wife and I felt that we were not done here in Chillicothe. God had called us here. God had brought us, our whole family, up here. We had a ministry going on with the YMCA, partnership with them, and everything was going great. And it just seemed like we're not done here. Something's what's God's plan? As a pastor, I had no idea. And it's hard to say that because I read the scripture daily, just like a lot of us all do, and I pray consistently, and I just wanted him to say, God, why don't you just send me a memo, send me an email, send me a fax, send me something so that I just lay out the plan. Just tell me what you want. And even if it's a year down the road, that's fine. I'll wait. Little did I know that it was really a year down the road. It was really that long because through talking with Rob, I was doing other things, and I kind of steered away from ministry. And all of a sudden, God threw me back into it. And I mean threw. He had me hit the ground running. I had to answer the call again. But what did that really mean? When I look at Mark chapter 8, verses 27 through 38, it starts out with Peter confessing that Jesus is the Christ. And Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi, and on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" And they told him, "John the Baptist," and others say Elijah, and one of the prophets. And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged them to tell no one about him. And he began to teach them that the Son of Man suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. And Peter took him aside and he began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, he rebuked Peter. And he said, "Get behind me, Satan. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." What's in this passage, it really jumps out to me, 3 different questions, and things that I had to look at in my life and what that meant. What does it really mean to answer the call? But then again, not just what did it really mean to answer the call, who was it that was really asking? You see, all of my life, I had been told what to believe. All of my life, they had said, Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus went to the cross. Jesus has divine power. Jesus is this. Jesus is that. I was told to believe. And there are a lot of people that I've realized in my life that I have pastored to that have told me that they've gotten rebaptized or they have recommitted themselves to God because they realized that when they committed themselves originally, they committed themselves because of their parents telling them to, or somebody saying, "It's about time that you did this. You're about that age." They didn't really know who he was, or who he is, rather. And then last, it screams, what does it all mean? What does it mean to answer the call? I guarantee you, when we wrap it all up and we look at what it means, it's going to mean something different for every single one of us. Every single one of us have to look and answer these questions to ourselves. In the beginning, Jesus is asking them here, who do they say I am? Now, Peter, throughout the gospel, the good news, Peter, in several of them, they see him perform several miracles. Just in this chapter alone, just previously, Jesus fed 4,000. Now, it indicates 4,000 men, but it doesn't indicate the women and the children. See, that day and age, the women and children, the only people that got counted were the people of fighting capacity. So unless you were able to be a warrior, unless you were able to be a man and be of value, in a sense, to the community, you did not count. And so here Jesus healed the 4,000. Or not healed the 4,000, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself. Jesus fed the 4,000. Could have been healed, just depending on how hungry you are. I mean, I'm a skinny guy. I know I'm in a lot of pain when I'm hungry. But Jesus feeds the 4,000. So, who do they say he is? And it seems like what they're doing here is they're mimicking, because their first response is they told him John the Baptist, and others say Elijah. It's interesting. Here are the people that are with Jesus, who are with him day to day, who are being taught by him on a regular basis, and they're seeing the miracles. They associate their whole life with him. They gave up their life to be with him. And yet, their first response is, well, some say Elijah. Some say John the Baptist. Now, these are people that they're associating him with. One of the prophets, they say. Jesus has to re-emphasize, who do you say that I am? Who do you say that I am? When you look at Jesus and how he has impacted your life, who do you say that he is? Can you answer who he is because of how he has impacted your life, because of the relationship that you have with him? Can you answer that legitimately, or is it because of what we've been told consistently? Peter answered him, "You are the Christ." And he strictly charged him to tell no one about it. Why be quiet? They're with the Christ. They're with Jesus. Why would we be quiet? In Mark chapter 4, I think it's one of the times where they are bewildered about who he really is. One of the stories that I love is when they're on the ocean, they're trying to cross the Sea of Galilee, and the water's tossing them to and fro, and here's Jesus down sleeping. And the disciples are having the water crash in over the boat. You think about thunder and lightning, a big storm, and all of this is representing chaos, and here they are on this water, and they're terrified of dying. Think about the people down in Texas and the storms and how terrified they are. Those are the same emotions that the disciples could have been feeling at this time. It was nighttime, so they didn't have the electricity on some of the boats nowadays. They didn't have flashlights. So the light that they had was whatever was provided by the storm. And so here is Jesus asleep, and they're terrified, and they come down and says, "Teacher, how can you be sleeping? How can you be sleeping at a time like this? We're going to die." And Jesus comes up and he says, "Be still." And everything is calm. In that time, they associated the sea, the water, with chaos. They associated with death and fear because there was no controlling it. You went out on that water, you might not come back. There was no controlling it. I've read stories where these giant freighters have been rolled over because of the waves that are 50, 60, 100 foot tall out in the ocean. I've seen I used to watch the television series Alaskan Crab that was on the Discovery Channel, where they went out fishing and went out trying to catch the crabs. And in watching that wave toss these giant boats around like they were nothing. Here are his disciples in chapter 4, terrified, and Jesus comes up and says, "Be still." He says, "Who is this man? Who is this man that's touched it, has come into our lives? Who is this man that we gave up everything for to follow?" Who is Jesus in your life? Jesus is the Son of God. Jesus was born completely human. He was completely dependent on Mary and Joseph. He wasn't born. He didn't pop out, give Mary a high five and say, "Hey, great job," and be able to speak Aramaic, Hebrew, all of it, Syriac. He couldn't speak several different languages. He couldn't go feed himself. He couldn't fend for himself. He was completely helpless. He went through every emotion, every feeling that we do as humans. Throughout the Gospels, we hear about Jesus suffering from pain, fear, sadness. We see emotions of happiness, love, compassion, temptation. He feels all of it. Everything that we go through, he feels. But yet, he was a man that loved us so much that despite wanting God to take the cup from him in Gethsemane, despite wanting to not do it, but despite being in tears about it, he says, "Not my will, but yours be done." And he went to the cross for his love for us. That's the man. That's who Jesus is. That's the one who is calling the crowd. That's the one who sits at the well and waits for the woman to come to the well so he can talk and teach them. That's the one who calls to the children. That's the one who goes to the sick and to the needy to heal them. That's the one who sits at the sinner's table and dines with them. That's the one who's calling. And Jesus, in the next section, he goes through and he says that the Son of Man has to suffer. Now, Peter loves Jesus, and here Peter is. Jesus is telling him, "Hey, dude, sorry, man, I gotta die. The Son of Man has to suffer and die. In 3 days, he's gonna rise again." That's something that's so crazy, isn't it? If I come up and I sit down and I talk to my wife and my kids and I tell them, "Hey, you know what? I've got to die, but don't worry, I'm going to come back to life. It's just going to take 3 days." I think I'll be going to the loony bin. But Jesus is doing that, and Peter says, "No, wait. Don't talk about that. Don't say that." Jesus is doing this out of a love for him. He loves Jesus. But he's also trying to intercede what Jesus is teaching. And so Jesus responds in a way that's almost a shock and awe factor here. "Get behind me, Satan." He says, "It's not yet your time." He's indicating it's not yet your time to lead. So get behind me. You still have a lot to learn. You need to follow me. And those are two words that go together, right? Follow me. Two words within the Bible that go together like peanut butter and jelly. They go together like two girls go into the bathroom. Follow me goes together. And Jesus is telling us to follow him. And he's calling to the crowd. He's saying, follow me. He's telling Peter, it's not your time yet. Get behind me and follow me. We need to answer the call. We need to truly understand who Jesus is that is calling us. And if we understand who's calling us and we need to understand what it means to answer the call, then it'll be a love and a joy and a great service, a great way to be able to serve him. Within 34, 35, 36, when he's talking about those who will save his life will lose it. Those who ever lose his life for me, for the sake of the gospel, will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my word in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So many times we get caught up in the things of this world. We live in a generation of instant gratification. I mean, we got drive-through dinners. We can go pull up to McDonald's, and in 2 minutes or less, we have our dinner right there. We've got instant popcorn. We've got instant milk. We can go anywhere and we can get food. We can go anywhere and we can get internet service. Will get us any information that we need. I mean, we've got portable computers that are actually smaller than this. And we live in a world that is full of instant gratification. We live in a world that we're so focused on worldly things that we can get caught up in those things. And Jesus is telling us what it means within this passage to answer the call. And it's going to be different for all of us. All right? It's going to be different for one person than the other. Not everybody needs to do something that's insane like what I did, where I uprooted my whole family and moved down to Searcy, Arkansas. Now that was fun. And screaming like a girl when I had a frog jump on the inside of my leg at 3 o'clock in the morning. Not knowing where I was going to live when I first went down there. Not knowing where money was coming from. Everything was a leap of faith. And so not everybody is going to have to do the same thing when it comes to answering the call. Everybody has their own purpose in God's plan. We just need to be willing to listen for when he asks us to do something. We need to be willing to serve. And we need to know who it is that we are serving. We have to end. Basically, brothers and sisters, let's put it this way. We end this entire service with the very question that we begin with. And that's, who do you say that Jesus is? Who do you say that he is? For me, he was my Lord and Savior. For me, it caused great pain at different times. For me, it caused pain and anguish for my family at different times. But it also also was great joy. Who is Jesus in your relationship with him? Brothers and sisters, I ask you to think about this as we go through this week, as we go through this busy week that we've got coming up this week. Rob announced several different announcements, and especially next week is a great weekend. Chautauqua, I believe it's how it's pronounced. I still can't pronounce it after two years. Chautauqua is a great opportunity to answer the call and serve him in some way. Answering the call and serving him to one person may be simply picking up the phone and calling and checking on somebody. To another person, it may be dedicating their whole life to ministry and serving. To another person, it may be feeding people at the end of the day. Serving God. Serving God is a relationship that is between you and him. And answering the call has to be between you and him. We have to allow ourselves to be open and listen to. We have to allow ourselves to be open and listen to when he needs us to serve. So go through this week thinking about that. Who do you say that Jesus is? Everyone has to come to a conclusion of who Jesus Christ is. Will you do that? Will you confess him for who he is? Will you confess who he really is right now? When we make that decision, then we can truly answer the call and we can truly dedicate our lives to serving him. I'm going to ask Pastor Rob to come on up and receive anybody that wants to dedicate their lives to him. It's been, for me, it's a great joy to serve in any way that I can. I love giving my life to Jesus. I love preaching. I love teaching. But it wasn't until I knew who he was, and it wasn't until I had my own relationship with Jesus Christ, the Son of God. It wasn't until I truly understood who he was that went to the cross and died on that cross, shedding his blood so that all of our sins could be washed away. It was at that point that I truly understood what it was to serve. My plans and God's plans don't always line up. But I tell you, brothers and sisters, his plans are always so much better. And having him in our lives is so much better than living a life that's empty without him. If you want to come to Christ and you want to confess that he is the Christ, I encourage you to do so now. I encourage you to begin your relationship with him. Let's do this.